Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching.
To this conversation about governing across the urban-rural divide. For the whole morning, this convening of people, of experts from academia and from elected officials and practitioners from all across the country have had conversations about the economic nature of our divide, cultural, religious, housing, economics, all the way through. What we found is that relationships, one of the panels, really focused on how relationships matter. I think one of the things you're going to hear in this panel is that even despite our differences on policy, the way forward and the optimism that we're going to hear from all three of our folks on stage is that there is a path forward for healing our polarization, both partisan polarization and geographic polarization. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. The University of Notre Dame's Democracy Initiative is about hosting a space for our academics to do their work with research, our students to be formed in a way that they are going to be the next generation of public servants, and about having Notre Dame be the place where the most serious conversations on the future of democracy take place. I think that we're fulfilling all of that today. So I want to thank you all for being here and thank our honored guests for being here as well. In order to introduce the bios of our three conversation partners up here, I do want to introduce Mary. Mary is one of our students who is a democracy fellow. It's a competitive pool of students who are working on a democracy-focused project for their senior project. It is our tradition in many of our institutes and centers to center a student in order to introduce our honored guests. So Mary, come on up.
Our moderator, Joe Donnelly, is a former senator from Indiana. He served in the U.S. House of Representatives representing this district, Indiana 2nd, for 3 terms, and then ran for U.S. Senate in 2012 and remained in that position until January 2019. He was served as U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See from January 2022 to July 2024. As the U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, he ensured the views of the United States were heard each time the Vatican considered new policies. Joe graduated from the University of Notre Dame and earned his Juris Doctor from the Notre Dame Law School. We are grateful that Joe is now teaching classes at the University of Notre Dame. Heidi Heitkamp served as the first female U.S. Senator elected from
Notre Dame live stream will begin
2013
soon.
to 2019. During her 6
Thanks
years
for
in the
watching.
U.S. Senate, Heitkamp quickly became a proven negotiator who worked across the aisle to fight for rural America. She personally showed that if senators work across the aisle to fight, if senators work together, it can lead to real solutions. Throughout her time in the Senate, Heidi prioritized improving the lives of Indigenous people.
Your Notre Dame live stream will
families,
begin soon.
Stopping human trafficking, guaranteeing
Thanks for watching.
affordable health care, addressing childhood trauma, eliminating unnecessary regulation, and securing an energy policy that keeps low cost but achieves climate goals. Providing equal economic opportunity to rural America continues to be her lifelong pursuit. Heitkamp previously served as North Dakota's Attorney General and elected State Tax Commissioner. Chris Sununu served 4 terms as the 82nd Governor of New Hampshire, recognized as a national leader in his common-sense approach to government and balanced navigation of policy issues that impacted the state's residents. Under Governor Sununu's leadership, New Hampshire was rated as one of the best states for business and growth in the United States. Under Governor Sununu's leadership, New Hampshire was rated as one of the Specifically, it was ranked number 1 for both personal and economic freedoms and as the state for the best return on taxpayer investment, making it the most efficient state government out of all of 50 states. He is now president and CEO of Airlines for America, the trade association
Notre Dame live
for
stream
the
will
leading
begin
U.S.
soon.
airlines. In that position,
Thanks for
he leads
watching.
the association's advocacy, including efforts to ensure that aviation remains the safest mode of transportation.
Should I mention if they have a problem at TSA, they should call them.
I think we're ready, and Governor, in your honor, Heidi told me that she's flying out in about 3 hours. So,
as am I, so we better make it.
And I was going to suggest to all of you, if you have a problem with the airlines, I have his phone number.
I needed you last night,
Absolute
my friend.
true story. Nikki Haley called Nick. I love Nikki. She's still a great friend. She called me last night because of all the storms that were coming through Chicago, and she was actually coming to Chicago. So I still get them all the time.
Yeah.
But you, Heidi, I'll pick up. Don't worry.
And that call at that point, you go, thanks for letting me know.
Problems?
Well, on this urban-rural divide, I was thinking on the way over here, there's an old TV show called Little House on the Prairie, many, many decades ago. And there was a fella, Charles Ingalls, who was Michael Landon, who was Little Joe before he was Charles Ingalls. And in the show, there was one episode that I just remember so clearly, where it was election night. And he was out in his farm with all the farmers. And the news came in over the, I think it was the Morse code or whatever it was, that his party had won. And he stood up and he screamed, he goes, "I can't believe we beat those city people." and so 150 years ago, this discussion was white hot and rolling along. But to all of you, when you look at what you've done, Governor, Senator, when you look at your states and you have Manchester and you have Bismarck and you have Keene and you have Mandan, what issues do you think cut across size and population in those areas that were important?
Well, I think all of them. I thought one of the most important slides that you saw at noon was the slide that showed that there's very little difference between urban and rural in terms of wants and desires and concerns. And that's the one we never focus on. We focus on the big variance, politically or whether it is economically, but functionally, we all want the same thing. And that's true across the board. I frequently say, what a cab driver in New York City wants for his family is no different than what a farmer in Carrington wants. They want good health care. They want good education for their kids. They want to be safe in their home. They want to know that they're protected from outside influences. I mean, it's just, so the question that you have to ask when you realize that is, why are we so divided? And that's why the governor and I have signed on this project, which AEI and Brookings have invited us to be what's called the Rural Prosperity Commission. And so we're co-chairing it. We're traveling all over rural America, listening, not talking much, but just listening, and also doing some academic rigor behind it with the hope that we can issue a report. And you look at the money that's been invested in rural policy, we aren't getting very good outcomes. And so we're trying to figure out why that is and what would make a difference. When you look at the ARC, no mistake here, we're looking at releasing our report in 2027 before people begin their presidential campaigns. We want to make sure that on every debate stage, they're asking questions about rural America. And that's why we're doing this project. But it comes from a place that we are more consistently interested in exactly the same things, urban, rural, but delivery of those things changes depending upon the zip code.
No, I would just, Heidi hit everything right on the head. It's about safety in your community. It's about ensuring that your family has an opportunity. Not to take too far afield, but I always remind folks, government is not here to solve your problems. Not at all. Government here is to create opportunity, and that's what everyone wants. What's the opportunity that I can have? What's the opportunity my children are going to have? And that opportunity is always guideposted by economic opportunity, safety, education, and that's what brings everybody, the drivers. And if you look at what people actually vote on, believe it or not, it's those issues as well. Generationally, it's different, right? You could look at the generational difference in a urban and rural area, and you'll see some difference specifically around social issues. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of people that actually participate and vote are voting on those core issues of security and prosperity for their family.
Well, when we look at the two areas, urban and rural, I mean, there's not a comfortable fit at this point. It's like one looks at the other and goes, "You're an elite." One looks at the other and says, "God bless you." How do we get past this where it seems like there's two different worlds sometimes? At least the perception. And some people are selling a perception, but
if I could, you brought up a very good point right at the beginning. It's always been like this. So to think that we're going to fix it, I don't know. I don't see it so much as a problem. Maybe just because there's a divide and a difference there, I don't see it. Cities tend to be blue and rural areas tend to be red. That's kind of always the way it's been. There's a lot that's more on culture than on politics for a variety of reasons. And culture is built on your work, your environment, your family, how you integrate with your community. So I'm not saying it's not a problem, but I'm saying it's not the end-all, be-all of what is really bringing down America. America isn't in a rural versus urban battle that has to be won by one side or the other. I think the point is, okay, how do you find that common ground, and how do you make sure everyone has enough information? So the folks in rural areas are voting based on their interests and what they want, and the folks in urban areas have the information and the influences, if you will. So they're making the right decisions on their elected leaders or their path of government or whatever it is, and not just being completely influenced by their surroundings. So it can be an informational and a cultural divide as much as anything.
I will tell you this, we need to call it out. What do I mean by that? I can tell you that I've gone into rural places where they talk about the real America, right? Oh, we live in the real America. I said, I'm pretty sure people who live in New York City believe they live in the real America. And so just as they feel disrespected, we need to call out the kind of disrespect that we see in rural bias against urban America. They're lazy, they don't work, they're all in the basement playing video games. I don't know, whatever image that is, and we're out there doing the hard work of making America great. And I don't let them get by with that. It doesn't make me very popular sometimes, but I think it is critical that that leadership in America quit dividing people in this country. Why are people so divided? Because it works politically. To be afraid of the other, to criticize the other. And when you are out there saying, how can we work together? You're sending a message of collaboration, of hope in our politics and in our policymaking. And that's really what we're doing here with our project. I mean, people look at us, we have different political perspectives, different political friends, but at the end of the day, we want this country to function. And we can't do that if we simply say we live in a world where there's people who are American who are better than other Americans. And so what I would say is, on top of understanding that this is a long cultural bias, the city mouse, the country mouse, I mean, we have little children's books who reinforce this message. It's important for leaders not to reinforce this message. And so make your political leaders tell the right story, is what I would say.
Do we have shared economic futures? And what I mean by that is, I think back to 2008, and we had struggled in Indiana with NAFTA, where town after town lost factory after factory. And it was resulting in so many problems. And so many of those factories were in rural areas or close to rural areas. And I remember meeting a person who was, actually this was 2007, in the administration. And they were talking about trade with China and how awesome it is and how spectacular and all of this stuff. And afterwards I went up and I said, well, I'm from a district that we feel like we've been screwed. And we've been screwed, and Wall Street has made out like bandits. And that's those guys. So what do you have to say to that? And the guy looked at me, he was in the Treasury Department, he goes, that would be correct. I was like, that's not the answer I want. I want a different answer. But do they have like divergent interests at times?
I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could make an argument. I think you're right. NAFTA, tariffs, what we're seeing now with tariffs, especially on farmers and stuff, have say, okay, what is the long-term implication of that? And has tariffs really screwed over, rural America more than and working class America and all that sort of thing? With the long-term vision of bringing manufacturing jobs back, in the short term, is this bump going to work against them? I think you got to really pay attention to where we're going with AI and technology. That's going to vastly work against urban areas, right? All these white-collar jobs, right? It's going to be a massive disruptor to our education system, a massive disruptor to Wall Street, how we trade and all of that sort of thing. And we're just going further and further down the line. If we don't need a person, we're probably not going to have a person at that job. You're always going to need people farming. You're always going to need people building things. And so when you look at where a lot of, well, I don't want to use data centers as an example. It's a very hot topic, especially here in Indiana, and for very good reason. They're not big job drivers, but nobody's bringing a new manufacturing plant to downtown Chicago, right? They're always going to keep going into the sprawl, if you will, suburban or greater suburban areas into rural areas. And so there's going to be opportunity there, I think, as a lot of the dollars get reinvested in steel and other things like that here in the U.S. But I think the biggest disruptor, the biggest divider in terms of where we go as a future will be technology and how that divides. technology is going to really help healthcare in rural areas, right? As we get more telemedicine, as we get more connectivity, as the traditional large hospitals, which we're not at the point where we can get rid of them, of course, but we just talked about a lot of the large hospitals are shrinking for various reasons. But a lot of us can go in and out of a surgery in a day instead of a week now. So they have to change their models in terms of how they provide their service. But you'll always need people, right? You always need the nurses and the doctors behind it. You always need that human component there. And so I think there's just other factors at play when it looks at some of the economic divides that you're going to see coming down the path.
So I think about the American economy as a chain link, right? And we're only as strong as the weakest link. And so if rural America is not doing well, then we're underperforming in the economy. And you can say, well, really, we could get rid of rural America tomorrow and it wouldn't have a dramatic effect on GDP, and I would argue completely the opposite. If you look at what we do in rural America, basically agricultural production, you eat every day, absolutely critical. What we do, and people don't realize, and I think the governor and Joe and I do, how much manufacturing happens in rural parts. Small manufacturing, part of that supply chain. When I was there and we were working on the XM Bank, I can't begin to tell you about the supply chain that was supplying Boeing. Boeing's an assembler. They don't manufacture, they assemble. And a lot of that stuff came from rural America. If you look at extraction and energy, where do you think that's produced? In states like North Dakota. You can argue about whether we should be dependent on fossils, but we're a huge wind, huge solar, extraction of critical minerals. And so I would say that we all play a role, but where in rural America we feel left behind is exactly what the governor's talking about, which is that technology. If you look at Boston, Seattle, San Francisco, and to some degree DC, that's 90% of the tech industry. There's no reason for that. We've been left behind. If you look at philanthropy, economic philanthropy, guess what? It's 1/10 of what gets invested in urban areas. And so it's a matter of demanding, and I mean that from demanding your place in the economy of this country. And how do we do that? And how do we prepare talent for that? And that's a big part of what institutions like Notre Dame are. They're preparing talent. There's tons of students here. I want to ask the students, how many of you are from a small town? Or from a town of and now I'm from a town of 90 people, not 9,000. So just understand my calibration here. But how many of you represent a town or are from a town of less than 5,000? 10,000, 10,000. 20,000. Raise your hand higher. Wow. Okay, so let's go to the 20,000. How many of you going home? Good, good. And that's the secret sauce, which is leadership. And that's one thing. If you said, what have we discovered in our travels on our rural prosperity? That this all hinges on leadership and belief and a willingness to go places where no one else will go and make a difference. And so, the people who think that the rural economy is irrelevant are, number one, not very informed economically, but what do we do to change that? The one key ingredient, I think, is leadership. And demanding a place at the table as we're looking at the economy of this country.
Well, when you talk about technology, and it is changing everything, but it's also changing the opportunity to live in rural areas.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden, like places in the Poconos went up 100% because they're all on Zoom. And when the company started talking and saying, it's time we started coming back to the office. It was like, no, we're good. So things like Zoom, things like the internet, the ease of transportation, is it making rural life more accessible?
Don't forget about the cost of living.
Yeah. And the cost of living.
The cost to live in a city is
I'm trying my best to remember
insane.
everything. Sorry.
But you know what I mean? But I mean, you live in New York, not only is the government just absolutely crazy, but the cost, because of the taxes and the bureaucracy, and you can't drive a car, I mean, it's completely unaffordable for anyone starting out, unless they have rich parents, basically, right? Nobody that works in a Starbucks or a McDonald's in New York City lives in New York City unless they're, commuting in from Harlem or
they have rich parents.
Or they have rich parents, So yeah, it's the cost of living in these urban areas have ultimately driven. You saw Kathy Hochul just the other day begging people to come back from Florida, right? After years of saying, go to Florida, we don't care. Now she's like, please come back. For the God's sakes, please come back. But they've driven not just working class Americans out, but the wealth out as well. So it's the bureaucracy and the cost of living and the structure of your government does matter. It's not like, I'm not comparing, I don't think every metropolitan area is like New York, thank goodness, but it does matter, right? And so you have to listen to the needs of that community, and not just the needs of what your party is saying or what you think the politics of the day might drive.
Yeah, and this is where, Joe, I think the cultural divide plays a role, and that's once again recruiting talent back home. I would move back. I hear from kids, I would move back home, but there's too much intolerance where you live. That doesn't look like me, whether that is an agenda that's not particularly friendly to gay, lesbian couples. Name your kind of cultural arc. And so when you look at it, rural places have to start being more welcoming. And I want to point something out, and I don't mean to be just touching a point right now that is sensational in the news. But I don't know how many of you read the New York Times today. There was a story in there about Kristi Noem's husband. But the story was about the reaction of his hometown to the disclosure of this. And none of them were defending it. None of them were saying, this is all hogwash. But they were defending him because he's one of theirs. And it was Democrats and Republicans alike. And it's that kind of level of tolerance and acceptance in rural communities that we need to project. And I will tell you, growing up, that's exactly what I saw in a small community. It's like, yeah, he's a little odd, but, he's ours. He's somebody's uncle. Really. I mean, and so it is that sense that rural communities, and this is another bias, that rural communities are insular, they're arrogant, and they're unwelcoming in terms of diversity. That needs to change if we're going to grow rural America. And so everybody needs to look at kind of that recalibration of their ideas.
I think that perception needs to change. That's not always the truth.
Well, I think that's right.
Yeah.
It's not.
I mean, go tell.
That's what I'm saying. Look at that story. I mean, it's a weird story, but look at how the.
That's a weird story. I know, it's a weird story.
People were saying, "Well, look at this town. Look at how they're reacting," and I thought that's exactly how rural. I mean, Kristi Noem's hometown is only 30 miles south of where I grew up. And I thought, of course, that's what they're going to say. They're going to rally around this guy who has been part of their community forever, who has family there, and they're going to defend him and love him in spite of anything that they believe happened. And so I think that kind of thing of acceptance is something that we need to talk more about in rural communities.
And what you talked about with Silicon Valley and, like 4 or 5 places and those kind of things, it makes it hard for young people sometimes to be able to get back to their rural town that they came from, that they've gotten this education, they've gotten these skills, they love their home, but there's no place to use it,
So I would say this. In New Hampshire, we had a very aggressive, we're the only state in New England that actually grows in population naturally. And the reason is, when we focused our economic development plan, we didn't go after 23, 24, 25-year-olds, because when I was 23, 24, 25, I wanted to be in Boston. I wanted to be in New York. I moved to San Francisco. I lived in all these great cities. There's a different level of culture and connection to the arts and all this excitement and energy, and you get to go out at night. And it's like it's a social life of a 20-year-old, right? We went after folks that were 27, 28, 29, 30, that are starting to have relationships, think about education, taxes start to matter. They want to start having families. Things that matter to them. And so they start making, I would just say, more rational decisions based on where them and their responsibilities going forward. And we were very successful, right, in bringing a lot of folks in. We brought a lot of folks up from businesses out of Boston, New York, and New Jersey. Everyone was fleeing. So you got to understand what you're offering. So I think there is opportunity for, I'll say, young people to come back, but you don't expect a 24-year-old who left the farm to come, at the age of 18 to come back when they're 24. Sometimes you have to give it time. And I love cities. I've lived in many cities for a long time. I live in Washington, D.C. now. I love city life. But understand, leave it to a city to always screw it up and convince a young person with a family to say, I just want my kids to go to a public school in a community where they can have, friends, and they walk outside after school and they go play basketball with their friends. That still happens in the majority of America, not so much in the cities. And that comes home to folks. And that opportunity just isn't there in an urban area. So it is possible. We do see it. We also, for what it's worth, we had a huge, we drew people in from Canada. People are fleeing Canada.
How's that going for you now?
They're still coming. Trust me, that our tax benefit draws us in. I don't know about the Dakotas, but our tax benefit draws us in. But there's always opportunity to draw folks.
We don't all agree on all issues.
A lot of Europeans coming. So there's ways to grow and bring and grow naturally. But bringing folks home is sometimes more of an issue of timing and the opportunity that you're providing for them given their period of life.
And it has to be intentional. You can't just say, oh, why don't they want to live here? Everybody. I tell the story about my sister who worked in Fargo Moorhead. And she went to a meeting, and it was all the city fathers, right? And this was 20 years ago. And they would sit around and talk about what a great place Fargo was to live, because they were all in the country club. They all had lake homes in Minnesota. Yeah. They all, and none of that, she finally said that none of that matters to a 25-year-old kid. You have and so again, leadership, understanding what matters. How do you create an opportunity? But it is tough out there, and we haven't put enough demands on industries that should be looking at building opportunity in rural America. So I'll give you an example. My daughter works in tech. She works for a company that gave her 8 months of maternity leave. 8 months. How are you going to compete against that in North Dakota? We don't have paid family leave in North Dakota. And so these are the things that we need to be talking about. If we want young families to find, where's daycare? What are we doing to offer education opportunities? What about walkable cities? The kinds of values that these folks have, outdoor spaces that people can enjoy. And I think Fargo, North Dakota, is growing. You know why? Because they've focused on those things. Yeah. North Dakota, along with New Hampshire, is one of those states that's actually growing population. Right. And they're growing population in cities that have focused on the amenities that younger people have, because they've quit listening to people my age about what makes a great city, and they started listening to young people about what they want.
Food is a big one, right?
Yep.
They bring in Fargo has incredible restaurants right now. Really? Yes, of course. First, it's surrounded by farms and fresh food and organic and all that sort of thing. But they bring chefs out there and they start these amazing restaurants. Why? Because the next generation, you guys, are foodies.
And we're becoming an agricultural tech hub. Yeah. Because of the investment that we've made in organizations that are building that opportunity out. And so, again, leadership, and understanding who your audience is.
In the tech part, they're doing what they know. Yeah. The agricultural part, that makes so much sense.
And what makes sense in their community.
Yeah. We had a town just a little bit southeast of Indianapolis. And the economic development folks would meet with me every year, and they'd be like, oh, we can't get anybody to come, we can't get anybody to come. And then one year they came in, and they said, what we always told all the young people was, we have the absolute lowest taxes in Indiana. We have the absolute,
we don't pay taxes.
It won't cost you anything. And the families are like, well, where's the park? Yeah. Well, where's the swimming pool? Yeah. Well, where's the new houses?
Yeah. Right.
And they all sat down, like you said, the older folks who were the economic development folks, and looked and said, we've been doing this wrong for 20 years. And they built an entire subdivision and sold it out in about a week. And then they put in a park, and then they put in a pool, and all of a sudden the tax base is up, the houses are up, things are growing again. And so
and innovation and entrepreneurship with the right kind of message look, you may want to work for this person, but if you have a good idea, we want to help you foster that good idea. How do we do that? How do we find VC? Yeah. And again, if you want to look at disparities, the investment in venture capital in places that are rural is abysmal. And we need to demand better. We need to demand better.
And if the one piece you probably missed, I bet another huge part of that town investment was in fiber. Yeah. Connectivity.
Oh yeah.
If you can stream anything at any time in rural America, people go, oh, okay, I can run my business. I can literally be a trader, a Wall Street trader in northern New Hampshire, which we have a lot of them that actually do that now. Because we really made sure and that's the Biden administration made a huge point of this. Didn't go as well. It went great for New Hampshire, not maybe as well as everybody else. Working with Secretary Raimondo in Commerce when they did the build out. In a lot of areas it just didn't work right because of the bureaucracy. In some areas like New Hampshire and a few others it worked very well. But that was hugely important to our economy. It wasn't just, hey, I hope I can watch YouTube without it being glitchy. It was, hey, I can now run a business. Right. I can now invest in my AI startup and still have a quality of life that I want for myself and my children.
There's like a kit of basics, isn't there?
Yeah. That's it.
You do this, people will come.
That's right.
Well, and Byron Dorgan, who is a former senator, basically announced 30 years ago we were not going to be on the wrong side of the digital divide. North Dakota is the most connected rural state. Yeah. Leadership.
Yeah. Leadership. So every day when you travel around in a lot of states, you go into the diners, there's a television network on that's saying that everybody in New York hates you. And they do that 24/7.
By the way, they're broadcasting from New York.
Yeah.
Which I find so funny.
That's a great point.
I literally said that to Brian Kilmeade. This is a true story. I don't mean to interrupt your story.
No.
4 days ago, I was on Friday, I guess, on Fox, and I was commenting how disgusting and smelly Times Square was. And Brian Kilmeade, who lives in New York, was like, I don't feel like it's that bad. And I'm like, everybody else was like, Brian, are you kidding? You walk out, it smells. And I realized, that's because I love Brian, but he goes from his house to his car to the Fox studio to his car and then back to his house in Westchester or whatever it is. But yeah, they will promote this, everyone in the cities and this kind of divide, this political divide, while they're sitting in the middle of the divide.
Right. And they don't want to move.
Of course not.
Yeah, no, they don't want to set up shop in Fargo.
No, 6th Avenue is very, very fine.
They make money off of it. And so they are, every day when I would travel around the state, you go to the diner with the farmers, and the TV is saying, those people, they just don't like you, they don't respect you, they think you don't have a good education, this and that. And that's all a lot of our folks here. And the flip side of that is in the urban areas, they're like, boy, I can't wait to go out and visit their farms. It'd be such a nice time to see them and say hello. Like I said, wouldn't this be great? And it's like the perceptions get completely lost. And there's narratives out there that feed people going against each other as opposed to coming back together. And how do we get past that?
Well, so one thing I argue often, there is a third political party out there, and it's not a good one, and it's the party of populism. And it's actually a place where extreme right and extreme left meet on creating headlines, on creating division, on driving the anger. Because why? Because people will invest into that, unfortunately, politically. That's where a lot of the money comes in. Oh, I cannot believe they're trying to do this. I'm going to give that candidate or this political action group all this money to make sure this doesn't happen or that doesn't happen because I saw this headline, mostly out of Washington, by the way. I mean, fundamentally, that's the biggest problem with all this is that we've gotten so lazy about how we consume information. We think Washington politics is politics. It's really not. I mean, the most core politics, the best politics, is local, and the politics that will influence you and your family's lives more than anything is local politics. Your local school board will have far more influence on the future of your family than the President of the United States, 100% guaranteed, because they will determine that structure of that education, what's going into that curriculum, the after-school programs, that foundation for your kids, which as an adult is all you really care about anyway, right? So I always say that's where bipartisanship really happens, focusing on that. And you lose that a little bit in the urban areas. It's harder. But in rural areas, we go to town meeting every year. It's not hokey and corny. It's how every one of our tax dollars is spent. The only local taxes we have in New Hampshire is property tax. As a citizen, you pay no other tax. And the governor or the legislature has no say on how that's spent. You go to your town meeting and you decide the teacher contracts and the curriculum and what potholes will be filled. It works wonderfully, and you have it out. I've had a lot of, my biggest fights were not with my state legislature. They were actually with my own brother in my town hall on town meeting day over recycling. And it was a bloody mess. But at the end of the day, you're out there at the school bus stop with your neighbor, even though you might have had a fight with him on something, and you get along. It's not personal, right? You fight hard, and you're still a community at the end of the day. And I always say, you want to start in politics, you want to get involved, you want to make a difference, start local, and hopefully you end up local, because that's where you have the most impact. You see all these national headlines that drive all this nonsense and this division that you're talking about. I don't want to say it's not real, but I would argue it's actually the least important, even though that's what gets the headlines and drives the money.
A lot of it's created.
And it's laziness. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot easier to motivate people with fear than it is to inspire. Think about that. Boo, oh, well, that's terrible. But if you said, let me give you my vision. And I think, I use this example, and some of you probably don't like him much, but I use the example of Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin did Manchin to Me, which was the gun, show, expansion of registration. West Virginia is one of the most solid vote Second Amendment places in the world. I mean, honestly. But yet he survived re-election because he didn't just do it, he went out and sold it. He went to every VFW. He went to every town hall. He didn't run away from it. He went out and talked about meeting the kids from the parents of Sandy Hook. He went out and explained. And he was able to survive that vote, which no one thought he could survive, because he wasn't lazy about his politics. And so many of our politicians now don't want to inspire. They want to take the shortcut. They only want to go through easy primaries, which you've never, we both represent states where we've had to work to get people to vote for us. A Republican
you gotta be there.
And a Democrat and Joe. Joe and I started a club when we first got there in 12. We're not supposed to be here club. Remember? And Joe let me be the president because Obama lost in my state more than he lost in Indiana. But, but we're not lazy politicians. We're used to going into rooms where people don't like us and persuading people that we're right. And so we need more of that. We need people, because what you watch on television is one thing, but what happens in a room, in a town hall, or in a meeting of the VFW, that matters, and that's going to override kind of the big narrative of national politics.
And again, the proof is right there. 2024 is the proof. Oh, Trump's going to get crushed. Nope. Folks that were listening to rural America, that went to the VFWs, that talked to people that had voted for Biden before, but now we're going, that was all there. And I used to say it to Dana Bash and Jake Tapper and all these guys in the media that I'm very friendly. I said, you guys are missing the story. It's not even going to be close, and it wasn't. Yeah. Because folks, there are folks out there that do listen. And it's not rural America versus urban. It's just the ability to listen, to say what is really impacting a lot of folks.
To bring this back to almost where we started, which is, and the folks in an apartment in the Bronx and the folks in a house in Mandan want the same thing. They want their kids to get a good education. They want to have a good job. They want to be able to go on a nice vacation and retire with dignity. And a big part of that, and I only have 2.5 minutes left before we answer questions, but housing and healthcare, they're like central to everything. And either one of you want to say in a minute and 15 about housing and healthcare each.
Governor Sununu will now solve the problem of housing in America.
All right. Well, let's talk about the housing. So let's talk about.
You now have 2 minutes.
So where's the highest vacancy rate in housing in America? In the inner city. Yeah. Right. There are a bunch of rich $1 million condos that nobody can afford to live in that they're trying to now convert in Boston and Manhattan and all over the place. They're empty. They're sitting there empty. Right. Supply chain has driven up costs. Inflation has driven up costs. Labor, the fact that you have all these insane labor costs and all that sort of thing across the country, you guys are paying for it. Your generation, unfortunately, is paying for it. to the point where, Heidi, I don't want to steal your point, but you brought up a great point earlier where you said buying a house is no longer an investment in your future.
Right.
It's just how you want to live, because as soon as you buy the house, you're probably losing value in it on day one. It's almost like a car. Before, you bought a house and the next day it was probably worth another 0.5% more, and it was a way to save and invest and provide equity for your family. It's just not like that anymore. So part of the problem is permitting and zoning have gotten so complicated at a local level. We've disincentivized apartments and multifamily housing in a lot of rural communities. That is starting to change, which is, I think, a very positive sign, but we have a long way to go. What we consider affordable housing is very different than what it was before, right? You can be a two-parent family with 2 incomes and you still can't afford the housing, you know? So, it's not just, hey, we're not building enough multifamily housing for low-income families. That is a very simple, rudimentary way to look at it, and you got to get a little deeper into the communities and the actual barriers and the waste, if you will, right? People are still investing in housing up until 2022, 2023 in a very 2005 way. And so, again, there's a lag, and I think we all need to catch up a bit.
So let me tell you about my little town of Hankinson. I went to high school in Hankinson. That's a big town of 1,500. I know you're all impressed now. But the city realized that if they were going to keep a workforce there, that they needed to build housing. So they built 2 houses. People moved in, they bought the house, they found them financing, they bought 2 more houses. They built 2 more houses. And the city made a conscious effort to build that housing project out. And now we have a beautiful, new housing. I wouldn't call it development because that sounds way too fancy, but a place where families are basically owning their home. These are not mansions, they're not McMansions, they're the kinds of homes that most people grew up in, and the city basically saw that need. There are mechanisms to do this if there is leadership, if there is a willingness to take those risks. But the one thing that I would say is that the governor and I can both agree that we can't be captive to stupid regulation. We have to understand what that value is and how can we build that value. And when the regulation is so onerous that the cost of the regulation increases a house 50%, we ought to be looking at whether that makes sense, because that would tell me that that's not smart regulation. I mean, no one wants an unsafe house, a house that doesn't meet fire code, a house that could get blown down in a 50-mile-an-hour wind, which we have frequently in North Dakota. But the other thing is, do we really need the fancy streetlights? Do we really need all of the bells and whistles that you're demanding in that community?
Every regulation has a cost,
Yep.
but not every regulation has value.
I believe you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have the Q&A session that's about to start. So, who's got the Q&A microphone? Okay, over in the corner there.
Hi, thank you. Well, I already spoke with all 3 of you a while ago. I want everyone to know that I really respect these 3 people. However, you're all 3. Yeah, no.
You know that everything before the word "but" or "however"
it
doesn't count.
matter. Yeah.
Don't flatter us before killing us.
If it were up to me, if democracy was me, if I single-handedly chose the president of the United States or the government, you 3 would be on top of that list. However, you're all 3 out of office now, all 3 of you. And I have a question for both of you, my Democrat friends, because in Governor Sununu's case, he was succeeded by a Republican. You come from very red states. In Senator Heitkamp's case, North Dakota hasn't voted Democrat in a presidential election since LBJ. I, a few years back, read the best book I've ever read about bridging this divide and how Democrats can speak to rural America, written by John Tester. And guess what? He also lost in 2024 in Montana. Now we have 2 parties gerrymandering like crazy, taking advantage of this divide. The sense I'm getting from nationwide Democrats is that they're giving up on the fight of speaking to rural people from a mere analysis of discourse and how it's changed over time, how it's evolved. They used to try to reach out. I don't get that feeling anymore. Do you still feel like that is a trend that can be reversed? How so? And I'm not asking based merely on an electoral perspective of how Democrats can win or not, but on the fundamental question of making sure the rural voters believe again that both parties are working for their best
You want to go first?
I can go first. After the 18 race, when I didn't get reelected, I mean, I could see the trend. And people accuse Trump, and really the trend started with the Tea Party. For me, and that was the beginning of kind of the tribalism that came. It wasn't about what you did. It wasn't about what you said. It's the division between Democrats and Republicans. And so I could see that. When I left, I started an organization called One Country Project. It's a C4. And I told people it was to reintroduce the Democratic Party to rural America and rural America to the Democratic Party. And the idea was, and we published tons of reports that said, look, you cannot win the Senate without doing better in rural America. So you can ignore us all you want, but it's to your peril. And so you need to figure out how you're going to communicate and what you're going to communicate. And it's never been about policy. I can show you policy after policy. I used to tell people that, you know, when the Republicans started making real headwind, when they jumped on the Farm Bill, right? So their whole thing was basically opposing the Farm Bill forever until they realized that if you want to win rural America, you better be, you know, understanding what's going on with farms. And so if you look at policy initiatives, the Democrats, as a friend of mine says, approach rural America as missionaries and not neighbors, right? You know, look what I've done for you. Why don't you love me? You're voting against your interests, which is, it's fingernails on the chalkboard when you tell people they're voting against their interest. No one votes against their interest. I know you all want to think that. But so I think it is going out and actually culturally identifying. And I just want to tell one story. My brother has the largest regional talk show in the upper Midwest. Talks to 100,000 people every day. He's more liberal than I am. Why do people listen to him? Because he knows about football. Seriously, because he's an old football ref, because he rides a Harley, because he goes to church, he's got grandkids, he hunts and fishes, and he talks about those things. He identifies culturally with his neighbors, and they will say, you know what, I don't agree with the damn thing you say, but you're one of us. Back to the Kristi Noem example, you're one of us. And so when we become the elite from the coast as opposed to one of us, where we have differences of opinion, we lose. And so we need to show up, shut up, and listen.
Amen.
And that's what Democrats do.
And to add one thing to that, when I was Senator Joe, I always won. If I was Senator Donnelly, the Democrat, I always lost. And the whole genius of when we had that horrendous Kavanaugh hearing that came up was I was Senator Joe before that started. And the whole idea behind that was not by accident, the timing and all of that stuff. But the whole idea was to rile everybody up. And Heidi. Sorry, Harry. I was thinking of Harry Reid. The whole idea was we got to find a wedge issue to drive people to their corners. And so our job is to be Senator Joe, Senator Heidi, to be there constantly. I remember coming in second in the pumpkin toss contest. And they leaned over to me as I was leaving. They said, we let you come in second. But you make friends. And so when you're their friend, that's what cuts through. You got to show up. Next. Yes.
So in the spirit of this conversation, Governor, I know you're going to leave, but I wish we could grab a beer after this because as someone that comes from New York, the kind of things that you said I thought were really harmful for this discussion. People in New York work hard. We're trying to figure out what's the best way to go about things for our kids, our families, our schools, and things like that. And so, I just wanted to point out, because I didn't want everyone to leave here and feel like New York City is this stinky government of a mess, where people are trying to make it there, make it work there, just like in North Dakota, South Dakota, Indiana, New Hampshire, Vermont, and everywhere else. I just wanted to share that with everyone else.
Look, you bring up a very good point in that I love New York. That's why I go there so much. I love the people in New York. I got in a fight with Andrew Sorkin on CNBC one morning because I think you cannot say it's affordable. It's completely unaffordable. Most of those taxes are completely wasted on useless programs that should be going to real quality programs and addressing the needs of the city. I had the same fight with Gavin Newsom over California. I love California. I used to live in San Francisco. I went to NYU for a little while. I love these cities. And leadership has screwed it up. The people deserve so much better. And you need, I'm not saying Heidi agrees with my point, but the point, one of the overall points is you got to show up. Stop accepting that this is just the way it is. Cities don't have to be run like that. The people deserve better. That's all. And that's why I keep going back. That's why I have fights with some of these leaders, because I know it can be done better. I mean, I had an argument with Gavin Newsom once over the taxes in California. And he said, well, you don't understand. California is a big state. That's why our tax rate is so high. Holy mathematics. I didn't even know what to say to that. And I just said, go talk to Florida and Texas. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way. I'm from a state where I'm from the live free or die state. I believe very strongly that the more government you have, it's probably a problem, right? The more regulation you have, it's more cost. Let people have individual responsibility, believe in the system, let capitalism flow, let investment flow. But all those people walked away from New York. It sucks, right? It's awful. And it's a negative cycle where more people walk away, more tax dollars walk out, so they raise taxes higher and it forces more people. It's like the worst type of government. So yes, you're right. I'm probably overly negative on it, but sometimes I think you got to shine a light and say, please stand up and fix that great city. It's too good to throw away.
Yes.
Governor and Senator, thank you. What are the minority, well, I'll say Black American populations in your states?
Oh, I'm the second. Vermont is the most white state. I think New Hampshire is the second most white state. It's about 90. We're about 90% white. So 10% minority in between Asian, Hispanic, and Black.
It would be for North Dakota under 1%. Our largest minority population is indigenous. And so about 7 to 8%, probably closer now to 9% of North Dakotans are indigenous. A growing Hispanic population, in part because of agricultural workers, but a very small African American population, and most of those refugees.
Wait, I'm sorry, can I ask a question? Well, there's got to be a follow-on question there, right?
So I look all over the United States for places to live and places to go. Am I still the only Black person in this room? This is my life. I'm always the only. Hey! But this is how I live.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about going to these places and these opportunities and no taxes and all of that, but if I get there and people are like, I ain't hiring you, what you do? The welcoming in the rural areas. So I just...
So if I could, so a couple things. I think there's, and again, I know you're not necessarily saying this, but you got to be careful. I heard this before when you did your presentation, that because money wasn't given to Black programs, you made a direct correlation to racism. That is awful. I think that's inherently a racist assumption in itself. I would say this, you're right. Culturally, it can be very unwelcoming. Do you know, as governor, we were giving money to cosmetology. Is that when you do aesthetics?
Hair.
Hair. And a young woman came to me, a young African-American woman, and I didn't even realize it. She said, you know what I have to do when I want to get my hair done? I got to drive to Boston. And I went, whoa. And it was a great piece of evidence, if you will, that we don't have a lot of the cultural pieces, not because we're racist, We just don't have those pieces in our culture. So it's good to promote them and find opportunities for them to, because we do, especially in our small cities, we have that's typically where a lot of our African American or Latino populations are. So it's not racism per se, it's a cultural divide that can be overcome. And I don't think that cultural divide is also political. I think that's a danger. And I say that, Heidi brought up the fact it's a little unique, but the most progressive liberal state in the country is Vermont, the most white state in the country, right? So it's not a direct correlation. You got to be careful of that one, too.
So, and I never mentioned any.
No, I know, yeah.
What?
I don't think that at all.
Yeah.
This is how I live. So
Yeah.
I don't know about
One.
move anywhere, but I'm saying if this is a great state, great opportunities for people. What is going on with the leadership to make it welcoming? I can come there
I
because
agree.
I can survive. Other people just not going to do it. They don't have the skin.
I agree. If you're living in a place where you constantly look around and you don't see yourself, you don't feel welcome, even if people aren't biased. And I'm not going to say that, but I do want to put a plug in for our project, the Rural Prosperity Project. We just spent 3 days in the Mississippi Delta, and looking at the historic black colleges. What can we do to be? Because everybody thinks about Morehouse and Howard. Let me tell you, that is not historic black colleges. And so kind of looking at what in those communities, what does success look like, and what can we kind of weave into our analysis that will bring, that will look at other places that don't look like rural North Dakota, but could be hubs for innovation. And so, yeah.
So we have 5 minutes left. Could I have any students students? Student? All right,
Those
there
look
you
like
go.
students. Those are students, Joe.
Heidi, compared to us, everybody looks like a student. we're a little far.
Okay. Technically, I lied because I'm a high school student from here.
Oh, boo.
Okay.
Now
you're
cheating.
Yeah.
I need to be more specific. I did a bad job on that.
I'm son of Notre Dame faculty and son of St. Joseph County.
Oh, there you go.
So my question is, we are talking about the rural and urban divide. One of the wild cards is the suburbs. So what I've seen since 2012 is that suburbs have dramatically shifted to the left. I'm from Granger. It's moved 20 points to the left. Like Carmel, these outer ring suburbs of Indianapolis, even Fargo has moved to the left. How do we see that factoring into bridging the urban and rural divide? And one off-topic question for the senators: how do you feel about the blue slip process for Senate nominations?
I don't know if that was a high school kid, but he didn't sound like a high school kid.
He's a very smart high school kid.
Very smart, very smart.
The suburban, it's interesting because in my election, Carmel, for instance, that you're talking about, my numbers in Carmel went way up. I'm thinking, this is awesome. And my numbers in like Morgan County went way down. Kosciuszko County, I laughed. I got like incredible things for the medical device industry. And they gave me their Legislator of the Year award. And I looked and I said, I am so excited about this. I am going to move from 27% vote in your county to 29% vote in your county. I mean, it's just as the suburbs keep going this way, the rural part keeps going that way. And so it kind of balances out a little bit, but we're trying to, how do we break through that to let them know that we're all part of the same America is what it is. Yeah. In the blue slip process, I have some really, really, really strong feelings on that I will keep to myself. Yeah. So,
I mean, on the blue strip, I think it's one of those traditions of the Senate to be respectful and to realize that senators do have something to say about who should represent them in the U.S. Attorney's Office and who should represent them in federal courts. I think it's a tragedy if they would remove the blue slip process, but I think people have abused it like they've abused the filibuster, and that creates some momentum to change.
I will tell you this. It works when people of good spirit want to do it. When people who are involved in being a performance artist senator do it, it just doesn't work anymore. And one person can stop it. And so its whole purpose makes a lot of sense.
And think about this. back when we were there, if you looked at states that were represented by a Democrat and a Republican, there were probably 10. Now I think there might be 2. I know I'm thinking off the top of my head 1, and that's Maine.
And
Give me a few months.
Huh?
you know, when Lugar and Bai were the senators, they gave each other the blue slips all the time, and it wasn't a very technical way to do it, but it's like, don't bring me someone crazy.
Does everybody know what a blue slip is?
Sorry.
Okay.
It is, the senators have to sign off before a nomination can go forward on U.S. attorneys, on court positions, this and that. And the standard was basically, I'm going to do everything I can to help you if you want this, but I won't do crazy. Now it's just like, I'm not going to do it because I'll lose my primary if I do it. That's right. So the system's been corrupted.
Can we bring a real clear example is Mark Wayne Mullen, who's now the Secretary of DHS. I think every Democrat except Fetterman voted against him. Half those Democrats.
Martin Heinrich voted for him.
Oh, okay, a couple. But a lot of Democrats who voted against him are very good friends of his. He actually gets along across the aisle really, really well. But, when it comes to the vote, Mark, I can't vote for you, but we'll help you any way we can, behind the scenes. So, and the other side does it as well, right? So it has its reverse.
I just want to say that one of the reasons for that is how politicized DHS has had. So it's not just about him. It's about taking a protest vote against what was happening in Minneapolis.
Can I get a question from a Notre Dame student? It will be the last
There's one over here, these good-looking
Are you guys both graduate students?
Oh, there you go. Oh, wait. They have all the answers.
How
they already have the
quickly
answers.
he forgets.
I'll come over there, right? I passed them both, too, so they're all good. I will come right back to you, but over here. Either one. We'll give them both, and we'll do 1-minute answers.
Okay. Super quick question. I know that we're at the University of Notre Dame, a campus deeply within religious tradition, and I think that's a really important part of the rural-urban divide, is particularly the growth of Christian nationalism. Yeah. You've seen that take place a lot within rural America on the populist right, but you're also kind of seeing a response to that in James Tallarico and of the Democratic side. So I'm just curious, your opinions on where kind of Christian nationalism fits into this, if it has any place at all in terms of electoral strategy or, reaching out to voters and their value systems.
Yeah, that's a really big question, and one that would probably take a legitimate, 5 minutes to kind of explore. But I would tell you that it is an outgrowth of the capturing of the evangelical movement into the right wing, and the outgrowth of that has become Christian nationalism. The interesting thing that's happening right now, even in rural communities, is now people of faith. You saw it in Minnesota. You see it on the Palm Sunday marches. People of faith basically saying, that's not our Christianity. And so now you're seeing some what I would call blowback.
I'm going to let you answer the next one. Okay. Yes. And this is the last one because they have flights. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. So my question
and I'll deal with you guys.
My question is just about environmental legislation, that sort of thing. I'm from California, and we get a lot of environmental legislation often times, which I feel is misunderstanding the actual environment or bureaucratically costing millions of dollars when in reality those sorts of projects could be a lot cheaper. So my question is, as far as urban and rural divide, do you think that there is some form of misunderstanding between the two in terms of environmental protection? Where do you really think that the faults are in trying to protect
I'll answer that. I was an environmental engineer for 12 years. This is what I did for a living when I came out of MIT. You've hit it right on the head. A lot of environmental ideas are bad ideas. A lot of them are great ideas. Not everything is good on the environmental side. We are smart enough now and have data to know, you know what, as Heidi talks about in the Midwest, yeah, fossil fuels are key, but they also have some of the most wind and some of the most solar, and you need a little bit of everything strategy, and you need to ease it in. If you go too hard, too fast, people can't afford it. And you know who gets hurt the most? Low-income families and elderly on fixed incomes. They have to turn on the lights as much as anybody, and those costs are passed through on the electricity bills. So if you want all solar and all wind and all that kind of stuff, it would be an economic disaster, an absolute disaster. I invested a lot in looking at offshore wind, right? The cost curve hasn't come down to the point where everyone's going, we're not investing in this stuff. We were hoping that by now would be actually cost effective, but to put those things up would triple or quadruple the cost of electricity all across New England. So you have to look through every environmental piece that you do, as it pertains to energy, which most does. You have to look at it through the lens of the actual ratepayer, right? It's okay to pay a little more for something, but what is the actual benefit? When we did solar, you know what we did? We put it on the roof of all the apartment buildings so that low-income families and multifamily homes were the first ones to get the economic benefit, right? You don't do these giant solar arrays that developers make all the money and the actual low-income families have to subsidize. So if you're smart about it, and we have data to do that, it can be done right. And yes, it has become a political divide issue, but I would argue some of the red states in the middle of the country do more environmental energy and resources than anybody else.
Everybody, let's thank our two friends here for being with us. And then we have some jerseys from next year's national champions that we have for you here. So.
Oh,
hey, I'll take it.
That's cool.
Thank you very much.
That's very cool.
That's awesome.
No, it's not a North Dakota State jersey. I am sorry to tell you, but
go.
Here you go. The next Jeremiah Love, right here. There you go.
There you go. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. After you stole our logo from North Dakota,
thanks,
we're
everybody.
still bitter, you know.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, here.